The night smelled of smoke and salt from the harbor. Boston, March 1770. The cobblestones glistened under lantern light as a cold wind carried the sound of marching boots. Red-coated British soldiers patrolled the narrow streets like wolves guarding a conquered city. Inside a dim tavern near King Street, whispers gathered like storm clouds. Samuel Adams sat at a wooden table, the brim of his hat casting a shadow across his stern eyes. The air was thick with the scent of ale and tension. Around him sat merchants, printers, and farmers, ordinary men with extraordinary fury brewing inside them. 3 years, Samuel Adams said quietly. 3 years of taxes, soldiers in our homes, our goods seized without trial, and Parliament calls it law. From the corner, a young silversmith named Paul Revere raised his mug. He called it order, he muttered, but it feels like occupation. The room fell silent as the tavern door creaked open. A boy no older than 15 entered, soaked from the rain. He clutched a crumpled parchment. "Mr. Adams," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "There's been blood in the street." The Boston Massacre. When Adams and Revere reached King Street, the smell of gunpowder already hung in the air. 5 men lay on the cobblestones, one of them a black sailor named Crispus Attucks, his lifeless eyes reflecting the lantern light. Red-coated British soldiers stood in a tense line, muskets still smoking. The crowd shouted curses, stones flew, and chaos swelled. "They fired on us," someone screamed. "They murdered our own." Revere clenched his jaw. "This," he said to Adams, "is how it begins." In the days that followed, Revere sketched the scene with furious precision. His engraving, "The Bloody Massacre in King Street," spread across the colonies like wildfire. Within weeks, every tavern from Massachusetts to Virginia echoed with outrage. The British called it a riot. The colonists called it murder. The Brewing Resistance. By 1772, Boston was a city divided between fear and fury. British troops roamed its streets, enforcing new laws, the Townshend Acts, the Tea Act, the Quartering Act, while colonial assemblies fumed in defiance. Samuel Adams began forming secret groups, men who called themselves the Sons of Liberty. They met by candlelight in the Green Dragon Tavern, a low-ceilinged room filled with the smell of rum, ink, and revolution. One night, Adams addressed the gathered men. "Gentlemen," he said, "freedom does not beg, it demands." They began organizing committees of correspondence, a network that stretched from Boston to Philadelphia to Charleston. Letters hidden in barrels and shoe soles carried the pulse of rebellion across the colonies. In a small room above his workshop, Revere engraved secret signals into the bottom of his metal trays. Each design was a code, a message to patriots across the sea. But the British were watching. The tea ships arrive. November 1773. Boston Harbor slept under a thin fog as 3 British ships, Dartmouth, Eleanor, and Beaver, anchored quietly at Griffin's Wharf. Their cargo, 342 chests of East India Company tea, taxed by Parliament without the colony's consent. The harbor watchman heard whispers that night. "The tea stays on those ships. It lands, and we lose everything." Samuel Adams called a meeting at the Old South Meeting House. Over 5,000 men packed into the church, the air thick with anger and candle smoke. From the pulpit, Adams raised his voice. "This meeting," he declared, can do nothing more to save the country." Outside, a roar rose from the crowd. Dozens of men, faces smeared with soot and feathers, pulled their cloaks tight and vanished into the winter night. The Boston Tea Party. It was past 10 o'clock when the first Mohawks reached the docks. They were not Indians, but patriots in disguise, Revere among them. They moved swiftly, silently. The moonlight glinted on their hatchets as they climbed aboard the ships. "Mind the order," one whispered. "No harm to the sailors, only the tea." For 3 hours they worked, breaking open chest after chest, spilling the precious leaves into the icy water. The harbor turned black with tea. The air smelled of defiance. A British officer, watching from a distance, whispered, "They'll hang for this." But no one was hanged. By morning, the news had spread through the colonies. In Charleston, Philadelphia, and New York, men cheered. In London, Parliament seethed. King George III slammed his fist on the table. "The colonists must be made to obey," he roared. Within months, new laws arrived, the coercive acts, known in Boston as the Intolerable Acts. The port was closed, soldiers occupied homes, assemblies were dissolved. Boston became a prison under the Crown. The Call to Unity. 1774. Across the colonies, leaders gathered in secret. From Virginia came George Washington, tall and solemn. From Pennsylvania, Benjamin Franklin, his spectacles glinting with quiet cunning. They met in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress, 13 colonies breathing as one for the first time. Patrick Henry, the fiery lawyer from Virginia, stood before them and declared, "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." The words struck like thunder. For the first time, the colonies spoke not as subjects, but as a people. The Silent Oath. Back in Boston, under the cold shadow of British guns, Revere prepared his horse. In the attic of the Old North Church, 2 lanterns waited to burn, signals that would one day warn of the British march. He whispered to his wife, "If they come by land, 1, if by sea, 2. She nodded, eyes glistening. "Then ride fast, my love. Ride for all of us." As Revere tightened the reins, he looked toward the harbor. The redcoats were gathering. The wind carried the smell of salt and war.